What do you think? Big fan from Lebanon. Shout out Lebanon. Thank you so much for what you're doing. My question is, do you think the banning will touch other Chinese companies like OnePlus, Xiaomi, for example? What do you think? Interesting question. Thought about this a lot, actually, because if you eliminate those brands, if you impose these types of bans on those brands, you're actually not left with that many. All the fastest growing emerging smartphone brands and sub brands are Chinese. Talking about Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus, Xiaomi, Realme, Redmi. I'm sure I'm missing some. It's crazy. Poco. There's all these global smartphones that have emerged that are scaling up the list for market share are Chinese. And so at this point, it seems like, okay, obviously Huawei had the greatest pace of the bunch, where it came from to where it ended up this past year. And it also had the 5G component, where not only was Huawei trying to sell you a smartphone, but they were trying to go in and map out the telco infrastructure for these various countries. And I think if it wasn't for that aspect, it may have never gotten to this point, because it seemed like the tower thing was the fuel that led to all the rest of the stuff that happened with Huawei. So because of that, I don't think immediately it's going to touch those companies. That said, what will touch those companies is this potential tariff. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a ban to have this negative effect that everybody's worried about. We talked on yesterday's episode about a bike manufacturer that was like, hey, we can't be in China anymore because of this 25% ban, or the potential, or 25% tariff, or the potential for this 25% tariff. And so they moved their manufacturing to Taiwan for now, and they were talking about opening a facility in Hungary. So for these brands themselves, in the absence of a ban, what you might see take place is them diversifying their production facilities and the geographies in which their devices are produced. So maybe a company like Oppo doesn't exclusively manufacture their stuff in China anymore. Maybe they move some of that production to Vietnam or Taiwan or wherever else it might happen to be. I'm not really sure. Now, the reason that's going to be a bit tougher is because the companies we've covered up until now, like Foxconn, Samsung, others, they're not based in China, right? So many of them have their origin in Taiwan. So moving things back to Taiwan, not as big of a deal as a native mainland Chinese company saying, hey, we want to set up shop in these other places. Samsung makes a lot of phones in Vietnam, for example. Mm-hmm. So it's a sticky situation. What I do think is going to happen regardless, and already is happening, is that public perception has shifted, and public perception shifting is enough to impact the entire marketplace. And if you tack onto that the 25% tariff, I think these companies, Oppo, Vivo, Xiaomi, could be hurt, particularly in North America, where they haven't even really put the foothold in yet, but where they were probably thinking about it. OnePlus is a weird one because, of course, it's part of that group of smartphones, but it's one of the few that had a real North American focus and has had some success here. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I think at the very least, we will see the prices go up and potentially be less competitive as a consequence of those two things. Consumer confidence shift, potential of shifting operations and manufacturing locations, and potential of the tariff, which could come into play. So I've said it before, I'll say it again. The big winner in this whole situation is Samsung. Big winner. Maybe Apple to a certain extent. Anyone playing in a premium space that isn't as China leveraged is at an advantage right now. And I think they're walking into stores right now and they're just saying to themselves, oh, I feel comfy with that Samsung brand name. Feel real comfy with it. So